Hi there. This is a number 12 sized cast iron Dutch oven made in the 1960s by Birmingham Stove Range. Big cast iron pots like this are the reason why people use words to describe cast iron, such as tank, beast, monster, and this is certainly no exception. This big pot here is 3 gallons in size, and it can eat a regular 5-quart Dutch oven for breakfast. And if you ever have the chance to acquire one of these incredible hulks, be sure to do so, because you'll get a lot of use out of this. Among other things, it lets you make huge pots full of stew, enough to feed all of your family, friends, and co-workers. And that's exactly what we're doing here, making one of the most popular dishes you can make in a big cast iron pot. Southern-style Brunswick stew. This is basically a thick meat stew where you take all of the meat you have available, throw it in a big pot, and stew it in tomato sauce with a lot of corn and lima beans. And as anyone knows, in order to make Brunswick stew, you have to use a big cast iron pot, because if it isn't cooked in cast iron, you can't call it Brunswick stew. This dish is very easy to make, but it does take a long time to cook. That's why we're starting the night before by preparing a big 10-pound pork shoulder and 5 pounds of chicken breasts. After removing the skin, we're going to sear it in the Dutch oven, then slow cook it for several hours. This is why I gladly recommend getting a big iron pot like this, so you can take a 10-pound pork shoulder and do this. From here, we add the chicken pieces. Searing this big hunk of meat doesn't require any fancy seasonings. After searing on all sides, all we add is salt, pepper, and garlic powder. Then we splash on some liquid smoke to add extra flavor. And it's ready to go into the oven to slow cook overnight. We're also soaking a pound of lima beans overnight. I like using a saltwater brine to soak the beans because it does a great job softening the beans, and despite what you may think, the beans aren't too salty when we eat them. And now we relax and wait for the next day. The brine has done its work and softened the beans, so we drain the beans and rinse them off. Saltwater brine, I have to rinse it off. Salt water does a great job softening beans. Then we add the beans to a pot and boil them for 30 minutes to remove their natural toxins. And now the meat is cooked and ready to be shredded. And this is why I love this part. Bones just pull right out. All we do here is shred the meat. So tender, I'm just shredding this with tongs. Then we cover the pot and let it rest while we prepare the other ingredients. Time to walk the boat. Because there's so much meat in the pot, we have to sear the other ingredients in another cast iron pan. While the wok is heating up, we prepare the tomato sauce for the stew. Here we simply add some brown sugar, 1/4 cup of Old Bay seasoning, and 1/2 cup of barbecue sauce. Oh man. Oh, that is a sauce, all right. And finally, we chop up our mirepoix vegetables, namely onions, celery, and carrots. By now, the wok is good and hot. We cook some bacon to produce bacon grease for flavoring the vegetables. And then we add the vegetables and stir fry everything until the vegetables are soft. All we have to do now is add everything to the pot, starting with the vegetables. Then we mix in the tomato sauce. Next, we throw in a whole lot of corn. Major stew here. And by now, the beans have been boiling for at least half an hour, so we add the entire pot of beans and water. And despite the fact that this is a huge cast iron pot, I still have to take precautions to keep from overflowing. This is why when you make Brunswick stew, you have to use a huge pot. And even though this is only my 4th largest pot, this is still plenty big. And now we cover the pot and simmer it on low heat for a long time. Here we go. And at last, our Brunswick stew is ready to serve.
Well, how much meat is in there?
All of it. You can serve this dish over rice, or just scoop it into a bowl and chow down. By the way, for those of you wondering how the seasoning in this cast iron pot would be affected by cooking this dish with a lot of tomatoes and barbecue sauce, as you can see, the seasoning on this pot is just fine. With a well-seasoned cast iron pot, you can cook tomato dishes, at least once in a while. Of course, after this, I'm going to cook a few cast iron friendly dishes with a lot of grease to help build up the seasoning again. And for now, you can certainly say this pot did exactly what it was supposed to do. This was easy to make, and now I have to give 3 gallons of stew to my friends and family. I'm sure they'll just be so upset about that. And this is one of the best reasons to own a huge cast iron pot. Everyone in your family will know you as the guy with the big cast iron pot. And that's certainly not a bad reputation to have. Thank you for watching.